In 1996, Kirk Douglas had a stroke so severe that doctors pulled his family aside and told them, look, he may never speak a full sentence again. He was 80 years old. His acting career, everyone just assumed it was over. The people closest to him quietly prepared for what they expected would be his final years. A slow, gentle fade in his silence. He lived another 23 years. Sharp, creative, fully present, all the way to 103. And here's the thing nobody really talks about. It wasn't medicine that did it. It wasn't money. It wasn't some elite longevity protocol. And honestly, it wasn't even pure willpower. So what was it? Because here's what makes this story even wilder. Kirk Douglas wasn't alone. Olivia de Havilland, Betty White, Norman Lear. These four people lived a combined 407 years. 407 years. And we're not talking about people who just survived, like they were just hanging on. These are people who stayed mentally sharp, emotionally strong, and genuinely engaged with life long after most people their age had quietly given up. Researchers who study extreme longevity went back and really looked at how these four people actually lived. And what they found, it challenges almost everything we think we know about aging. By the end of this video, you're going to know exactly what habits kept them alive and thriving. But I'm saving the most important one for last, because it's the one that surprises everyone. It has almost nothing to do with food or exercise, and it might honestly be the single most powerful thing any of us can do for our health, starting today. Let's start with the habit that kept a stroke survivor mentally sharper at 95 than most people are at 45. Kirk Douglas and the refusal to quit. So who was this man, really? Like underneath the Hollywood legend. Who was he? Kirk Douglas grew up desperately poor, son of immigrants, and he always said that his tough childhood taught him one thing early, and it stuck with him his entire life. Quitting was never an option. By the 1950s, he was one of the biggest movie stars on the planet. Spartacus, Champion, a voice that could fill a room without a microphone. And then, overnight, his world changed. The stroke made it hard to speak, hard to swallow, for an actor whose entire career literally lived inside his voice. I mean, can you imagine? That could have been the end of everything. Most people, honestly, would have let it be. But Kirk treated his recovery like a full-time job. Every single morning, he did speech exercises. Not for a few weeks, not for a few months, for years. That daily repetition, that showing up even when progress felt completely invisible, that's what changed everything. And science actually backs this up in a pretty fascinating way. When you keep forcing your brain to work, when you keep pushing it to learn new things even after serious injury, the brain starts to build new pathways. It adapts. It literally rewires itself. Kirk was living proof of that. But here's where it gets kind of strange. Researchers found something in Kirk's story that had almost nothing to do with speech therapy or physical recovery. Kirk Douglas gave away more than $50 million throughout his life, to schools, to hospitals, to communities. And it turns out, that generosity may have been one of the most powerful health decisions he ever made. Studies show that being generous literally changes your brain chemistry. It activates the reward system. It lowers the kind of chronic low-grade stress that quietly accelerates aging from the inside out. Kirk also switched to a Mediterranean diet, olive oil, fish, beans, vegetables, the whole thing. He stayed deeply connected to his family. He kept writing, publishing books well into his later years. But keep that generosity finding in the back of your mind, because it connects to something much bigger that we're going to come back to. Kirk stayed curious, connected, and purposeful for over 2 decades after a stroke that, by every reasonable expectation, should have ended him. Now, here's someone who took a completely different path and got almost the exact same result. Olivia de Havilland and the power of walking away. Here's something almost nobody talks about when it comes to Olivia de Havilland. At 37 years old, right at the peak of her Hollywood career, when the roles were coming in, when she was winning Oscars, she made a decision that everyone around her thought was absolute career suicide. She moved to Paris, permanently, not for a film, Not for a relationship. Not for anyone else. She did it to slow her life down. On purpose. She lived to 104. Think about what that actually means. While her peers stayed inside the Hollywood machine, the parties, the pressure, the constant performance, the relentless need to stay relevant, Olivia quietly stepped off the treadmill entirely. And science now tells us pretty clearly why that decision may have added decades to her life. Chronic stress is one of the most damaging forces on the human body. It raises cortisol. That's the hormone that speeds up aging, damages the heart, and weakens the immune system over time. Olivia removed herself from that environment before it could do its worst. And I think that's genuinely remarkable, because most people don't do that. Most people stay in the thing that's slowly draining them, because walking away feels like losing. For Olivia, walking away was the win. In Paris, she ate fresh food from local markets. She used olive oil. She ate slowly at a table with other people. No rushing, no screens, no sad desk lunches. Research actually shows that social meals reduce stress and help your body process food more effectively, which, when you think about it, makes total sense. She spent her days reading, learning new things, staying genuinely curious about the world. Scientists who study brain aging say that keeping your mind actively engaged is one of the most reliable ways to slow cognitive decline. Olivia seemed to understand this intuitively, even before the science caught up. Her story is really about what she walked away from. Our next person, her secret was something she ran toward every single day of her life. Betty White and the biology of joy. Betty White almost made it to 100. Almost. And she famously joked that her secrets were hot dogs and vodka, which, honestly, is such a Betty White answer that I kind of love it. But the truth was something entirely different. Betty's real secret was animals. She poured enormous amounts of time and energy into animal welfare throughout her entire life. And science has actually found that people who have close bonds with animals carry measurably lower levels of cortisol, that same aging hormone we talked about with Olivia. Being around animals also increases oxytocin, which is the chemical in your brain that creates feelings of calm, safety, and genuine happiness. But Betty had another habit, and I need you to slow down for a second and really hear this one. Think of someone right now, someone who hurt you, someone you're still carrying some resentment toward. Even if it happened years ago, even if it was something you thought you'd moved on from. Got someone in mind? Okay, here's what that resentment is actually doing to you. Holding a grudge isn't just emotionally draining. It is medically measurable. When you stay angry at someone, your body keeps producing cortisol on a low, slow, constant burn. Day after day, week after week. That ongoing stress damages your cardiovascular system, disrupts your sleep, and accelerates aging at a cellular level. Every single day, you carry that resentment. You're paying for it with your own health. Not theirs, yours. Betty White understood this instinctively. She lived by the belief that life is too short to stay angry. She refused to hold grudges, not because she was naive, not because nothing bad ever happened to her, but because she genuinely understood that emotional weight has a real physical cost, and she wasn't willing to pay it. If there's one thing from this entire video you share with someone today, honestly, let it be that. Betty also never stopped working. Not for money. She did it because she loved being useful. She was still showing up, still learning, still contributing well into her 90s. And here's the pattern. People who live the longest almost always have a reason to get out of bed in the morning. They don't sit still and wait. We've got one more person, and once you hear his story, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Norman Lear and the two words that changed everything. You know that feeling when something embarrassing happens, something small even, like you said the wrong thing or made a mistake at work, and your brain just will not let it go? It replays at 2 in the morning. It replays in the shower. And then weeks later, completely out of nowhere, it replays again. Like your mind has this cruel little highlight reel running on a loop. Scientists actually have a name for this. They call it rumination. And it turns out it's one of the most physically damaging things a human being can do because your nervous system genuinely cannot tell the difference between a real threat happening right now and a painful memory from 3 years ago. Your body responds to both with the same flood of stress hormones. Over time, that wears down your heart, your immune system, your sleep. Everything. Norman Lear, the man who created All in the Family, who is still actively producing television at 99 years old, had a 2-word answer to this problem. That was his entire philosophy. When something bad happened, he felt it. He didn't push it down or pretend it didn't hurt. He acknowledged it fully. And then he made a conscious choice to move forward. Not because he was emotionless or because he had some superhuman ability to not care, but because he refused to let yesterday's pain consume today's energy. I mean, isn't that kind of beautiful in its simplicity? Norman also deliberately stayed around younger people. He stayed curious about new ideas, new ways of thinking. He woke up every morning feeling genuinely lucky to work on things that mattered with people he loved. Researchers who study centenarians, people who live past 100, have a checklist. And Norman Lear? He checked every single box. The one thing they all shared. So let's actually look at what we have here. 4 completely different people, different diets, different countries, different personalities, different careers. Kirk pushed through physical devastation with relentless, almost stubborn discipline. Olivia stepped away from everything and chose stillness and simplicity. Betty laughed her way through 9 decades and flat out refused to carry anger. Norman moved through pain the way water moves through a drain, feeling it, acknowledging it, and then just flowing forward. On the surface, they seemed to have almost nothing in common, except one thing. Every single one of them knew, with total clarity, what they were here to do. Kirk fought to recover so he could keep being generous. Olivia chose herself and kept learning. Betty lived for animals and for making people laugh. Norman used stories to change how the world thinks. That's purpose. And I want to be really clear, this isn't motivational language, this isn't feel-good fluff. A major study published in 2019 found that people with a strong sense of purpose have a significantly lower risk of dying from all causes. Purpose actually changes how your body works, from your hormone levels to your immune system response. This is measurable physiological stuff. And here's the thing that really stopped me when I first understood this. The longest-lived people weren't obsessively optimizing their health. They weren't tracking their macros at 3 a.m. or stress testing their sleep scores. They were simply too busy doing something they genuinely cared about to spend much time worrying about dying. That's the habit. That's the whole thing.